So when that guy was talking about accessibility, he's talking about kind of the VR experiences, and he's talking about all of and he's talking about how we kind of need to make VR experiences accessible to more people. When I think about accessibility, I start thinking about making just web content accessible at all. And so I ask the question: is any web content today, is 2D web content accessible to us in VR? So the VR web is kind of still a lot of 2D, right? The web in general has a lot of 2D pages. It's mobile, so we're talking about mobile devices. There's millions of mobile devices. There's hundreds of thousands of kind of tethered devices that are more powerful. And input is limited. So a lot of us kind of talk about using or building experiences around controllers and things like that. But it actually turns out that even like most Gear VR users don't have controllers, so they're just using the web. So with that in mind, we kind of look at, well, what are the most used applications? It actually turns out virtual desktop and browser VR apps are right up there. They're the most used. And I would ask, how do they do that? Is there something special about them? And the crazy thing is, they're uncomfortable. Like if you've used them, you're kind of looking at the text, you're kind of squinting a little bit. It actually gives all of us an accessibility issue. I would say it lowers all of our eyesight. It makes all of us have lessened motor skills. It makes it much harder for us to kind of interact. And so I think the solution to this is kind of 4 key areas for us to look at in browser UX design. And so I call this high quality reprojection. So how do we fix the 2D web into the 3D space and make it look good? Nail input. So how do we have a very accessible input? And Boris, I think, gave us a really interesting one, which is, all the way down to gaze cursors. It can kind of work. Design for security and trust. And the last one is redesigning the medium, which I won't even get to. But I think once you see the kind of designing for trust, you'll see that it also kind of parallels the guy's shopping experience. So for 2D content reprojection, what can we do? So I think, first of all, we can fix text. Text is pretty horrible. Text is designed to be presented on a 2D screen that's high DPI. We use things like clear text. We use pixel snapping. I think understanding the location of the presentation and then augmenting the rendering of the actual web page so that it takes into account where it's going to be presented might be kind of critical to that. And that's going to be baked all the way through the browser stack. At Oculus, we use cylinder surfaces. So we have a way of kind of making the pixels matter. The way that we present those pixels to you, there's a more one-to-one ratio, and there's less loss of information when we present that to the user in VR. And that's just custom projections, and it takes into account a lot of things about our platform. So everybody has to do this themselves, unfortunately. We need to wrap it in a really positive, good VR UI, and so it should be positioned for head comfort. I like the fact that Laszlo said he had users saying, "Hey, there's too much head movement." Right, and you probably feel that way too when you're in VR. You see the thing in front of you. Even a lot of browser projections today take up more of the screen, and so to look at a web page, you have to look left and right, which is kind of awkward. And so like if there's more tabs and stuff, then you're kind of looking around. A lot of users in VR just kind of want to stay there. They have limited head mobility. Like I personally have limited head mobility. I always I'm a programmer with a tight neck, so it's hard to even move my head around. So you can imagine like designing it to keep it in their face. I like what the guy said about the hot spotting zones. Put stuff in front of me. And kind of look toward mobile panel-like designs. I mean, when we went to mobile, we made a lot of really good design consideration. So kind of design for those mobile panel-like designs, big hit targets. And then there's something we should all be considering, which is stop displaying desktop content in VR, even though we feel like we have the screen real estate, maybe focus more on being a mobile browser. Rethinking user input models. I think most inputs can be resolved with gaze. So we've seen this quite a bit. There's gaze and hold, gaze and press, inertial gaze. So like as I gaze left and right, maybe a scroller is automatically moving for me. Big hit targets. This works really well for basically new content. You can kind of see this in my top diagram. Hit target attraction. So if a user's looking towards something, maybe pull their gaze toward it a little bit more. Right, actually put some gravity. We did this in Connect in the NUI design language, and it worked kind of well. And then when they move away, maybe make it a little bit harder for them to move away to snap onto the next item, because if they kind of hit the edge of it and then they accidentally move back to the right, we don't want it to accidentally fall off. And then shape-based hit testing for legacy content. So project a circle or a square and hit test multiple things and try to pick something for the user. And then link disambiguation UX. I think every browser ended up building something like this at some point. Not all of them shipped it. But the idea is, especially when there's a bunch of small content on the screen, give the user kind of a blown-up view and allow them to kind of pick between the items if you feel like they might have hit multiple items. This is very critical for gaze, where the user's movement is pretty imprecise. And I think with the simplified UX, we should basically be rethinking voice commanding. That's one of the things I think that should come out of this, is we should basically focus on designing a couple of basic voice commands. And then I kind of go in a little bit to predictive and context-aware keyboards. That's going to be pretty critical. When you're dealing with keyboards today, basically they have too much information, so can we limit that information based on the context the user's running in? And the last bit is just on user trust and security, which I won't get to, but you guys can look at the screen and if you have any interest in looking at it.